We, representing the Aborigines of Australia, assembled in the conference at the Australian Hall, Sydney, on the 26th day of January 1938, this being the 150th anniversary of the white man's seizure of our country, hereby make protest against the callous treatment of our people by the white men during the past 150 years. And we appeal to the Australian nation of today to make new laws for the education and care of Aborigines. And we ask for a new policy which will raise our people to full citizen status and equality within the community.
It was a simple call for equality, but when this declaration was first written almost a century ago, it was radical. The year was 1938, and on the 26th of January, Sydney was marking a milestone.
And now they're all ready to see reenacted the landing of Captain Phillips, an event which took place 150 years ago today.
But the festivities were lost on many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Aboriginal people were under severe control and restriction by the established state protection boards. Everyday decisions on your life, whether what you ate, what you wore, who you could marry, where you could go, were restricted, heavily restricted.
Amidst the celebrations, a small group dressed in black stood out from the crowd.
They not only broke the laws that prevented them from gathering, but they actually stood in the main part of the colony to stand in opposition and/or as a contrast to the celebration, to declare it a day of mourning.
After the parade had passed, around 100 people gathered in this building for one of the most significant but little-known civil rights protests of the 20th century. The site of what became known as the Day of Mourning protest is now owned by the Sydney Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council.
The power of what occurred here in 1938 continues to resonate certainly on myself and many others who are aware of what's took place here.
The group called out the appalling living conditions on Aboriginal missions and reserves and demanded full citizenship and equality.
You know, there were so many of them that turned up, and they at great risk to themselves, you know, risking arrest. You know, these are Aborigines free roaming.
Suzanne Ingram's grandmother, Louisa Ingram, was part of the protest and was captured in this iconic image.
I just have a very distinct memory sitting on the couch in the lounge room, and the photo was always there.
Suzanne has fought to preserve the legacy of the quietly strong Wiradjuri woman widely known as Mrs. Ingram.
She had 11 children. My mother's the middle. My relationship with her was very close. I was very fortunate to have had her.
Annie Druitt's grandmother, Pearl Gibbs, helped organise the Day of Mourning protest. She describes her ancestor as a great communicator with a fighting spirit.
If Aboriginal people are excluded from schools, from work health and safety, from hospitals, from the whole like, she was noticing that, and that's what she was agitating for along with all the other protesters out there.
Pearl Gibbs was later instrumental in the 1967 referendum, which saw Aboriginal people counted in the national census.
So there's a stamina, there's a determinism, there's a, wow, how to make it better. What is really heartbreaking is that we're still here 85 years later having similar conversations.
There's not enough people in this country, black or white, who really know their history.
John Maynard has dedicated much of his life to preserving Aboriginal history, a career inspired by his grandfather, Fred Maynard.
My grandfather, a young man, had travelled widely as a stockman, a timber getter, and seen the shocking conditions of Aboriginal people across the state. And this sort of, percolated with him and eventually saw it emerge as an organised political movement with a platform of seeking Aboriginal justice.
Fred Maynard was not present at the Day of Mourning, but his work in the decades prior laid the groundwork for the protest to happen. In 1924, he founded the country's first politically organised Aboriginal activist group, the Australian Aboriginal Progressive Association. The group held its first civil rights conference the following year, which was hailed a success in local newspapers.
They demanded that all the state protection boards be abolished and replaced by an all-Aboriginal board to sit under the Commonwealth government. That's a voice to Parliament nearly 100 years before what they're talking about today.
We stand on the shoulders of giants. It's in that very hall in 1938 that our people gathered.
The sad thing about this day called January 26, 85 years later after the 1938 protests, is that we're still doing it. It's crazy.
As another landmark referendum approaches, it remains to be seen whether the Voice to Parliament can answer long-standing calls for Aboriginal representation.
The Voice lacks credibility. I think it has a credibility problem. And not just with Australians generally, which is what I'm seeing, but absolutely with Aboriginal people.
My grandmother was fighting for a voice back in 1938. So I feel quite confident that, she'd be out there protesting on the streets, making the speeches in the same way. I hope that I can honour her memory and her legacy by advocating for the same thing.
On the 16th of August 1975, this famous photo was taken. It shows the former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam pouring sand into the hand of Aboriginal leader Vincent Lingiari. A simple gesture that symbolised handing the land at Wave Hill in the Northern Territory back to the Gurindji people. But the journey to get there was far from simple. It started back in the 1960s. At the time, Wave Hill was the biggest cattle station in the world, controlled by British landowner Lord Vestey. The Gurindji people, who had lived on the land for generations, worked for Vestey. But they weren't paid fairly, and conditions were tough.
The station's 100 Aboriginal stockmen, with their 100 dependents, are camped in the dry bed of the Victoria River, with little shade from 90-degree heat, dust and flies.
Eventually, Gurindji leader Vincent Lingiari said it was time to act.
And I said, well, what was before the Vestey born and I born? I said, that was a blackfella country.
So, on August 23rd, 1966, Mr. Lingiari and his fellow Aboriginal workers went on strike. It became known as the Wave Hill Walk-Off. They moved their camp away from the Wave Hill station to a sacred site called Dagaragu on Wattie Creek. They wanted to set up their own cattle station and said they wouldn't move until their land was returned to them. For years, petitions and negotiations went on between the Gurindji people, the NT administration and the Australian government in Canberra.
31, 32, 33.
Well, it's basic justice that their land is recognised.
Equal rights! We got equal rights!
As the news spread across the country, thousands of Aussies joined the campaign, including the leader of the Labor Party, Gough Whitlam, who made this promise during his 1972 election campaign.
We will legislate to give Aborigines land rights. Not just because their case is beyond argument, but because all of us as Australians are diminished, while the Aborigines are denied their rightful place in this nation.
Later that year, Gough Whitlam became Prime Minister.
From little things big things grow. From little things, big things grow.
But it wasn't until 1975, 9 years after the Wave Hill Walk-Off started, that he followed through with his promise.
8 years went by, 8 long years of waiting, till one day a tall stranger appeared in the land. And he came with lawyers, and he came with great ceremony.
I solemnly hand to you these deeds as proof in Australian law that these lands belong to the Gurindji people.
And through Vincent's fingers poured a handful of sand from little things, big things.
50 years on, and the Wave Hill Walk-Off is seen as a pivotal moment in Australia's history. It led to significant legal and social changes for First Nations people, which is something many agree is worth celebrating.
I think it was about 10 or 11 years old when that came through Moree, and there's a pretty prominent group of people, black and white, that travel on the bus with Charles, and he brought his bus down the Mission, and a busload of us kids got on the bus and went up to the pool with him. Us kids didn't get much access to town in general besides school. It was pretty daunting, pretty scary. I remember standing beside my dad and hanging onto his pants because there was an angry crowd across the street, being pretty vicious, pretty racist, and some of the comments they made were unbelievable. I got scared to the point where I said, "I want to go home, Dad," and he said, "No, you'll be safe," because I knew he was my protector. There was a lot of pride that the community stood their ground, and we stood behind the students, and the students were great.
All the town, they heard this bus was coming to town, and Charlie Perkins, the famous soccer player. A lot of people were around, and it was just lovely to see the students fighting for Aboriginal rights in Walgett, and their journey onwards through to the other towns. It was important because it opened up the RSL to the returned soldiers that wasn't allowed to go in there. They were allowed to march, but they'd only have to march up to the RSL, and then they were dismissed, and they could not go in to have their lunch or join in the celebrations at Anzac Day, and that all changed.
I think it gave us the courage to start challenging processes because, whatever was thrown at us, we just accepted it, and that's the way it is. But we found out late in life that, no, we need to make change, and change has been made in a positive without the Tent Embassy, without a lot of our advocates, our old people, who fought to get a referendum in the first place.
My deeper objective was for Aboriginal people to realise, hey, listen, second class is not good enough, You don't have to always be first class, but don't always be second class. And don't cop shit, when you don't have to. And you don't have to live on riverbanks and in shanty huts and at the end of a road where there's rubbish tip. Live in town. And you don't have to cop these white men sneaking around pinching Aboriginal women at night, sitting down the front of picture theatres, not being able to sit in a restaurant. We know we allow you as an Aborigine to sit in a restaurant. That's not on. And, you know, and the timing was right. If I didn't do it, somebody else would have done it, and other people have done it in a different way.
I was Rosaline Curnos, but I've changed my name by deed poll to Rosalie Curnos Monks. It was the highest referendum outcome ever in Australia. And a lot of referendums fail, but this one, just absolutely fantastic. And that was the beginning of the Aboriginal black consciousness rising. But the audacity to say that they would allow us to be counted in the census, that was it. That's when people should have said, hey, this is our right. We want to be counted. I'm not taking away anything from those people, my people, that fought for us to be recognised. I just think it should have been up to the government of the day to say there are the first people of this country and they have the rights which we have taken away from them, we give it back to them. That goodwill was not there, and that's what hurts me to this day. So from the referendum came organisations, whether they were government departments or whether they were non-government departments, specifically set aside to assimilate or integrate Aboriginals into the mainstream society. And even today, I look at the referendum. It was not a lie, nor was Mabo claim to his country a lie. It was real. We were feeling the pain. Now that pain appears to me to be getting worse, because we've become a curiosity value in the last throes as we try and hang on to our culture and to our beliefs and to our lands. That is still here. And the resilience of the black Australians is something to be admired.
It's people power in action.
Always was, always will be. Aboriginal land.
A march which marked 50 years of fighting for Indigenous land rights and sovereignty.
Land rights now. Aboriginal land.
Today's action was peaceful, and it was led by one of the Embassy's 4 founding members.
And so here we are, 50 years on, and we're still arguing and saying that native title is not land rights.
He's vowed to stay the course.
I make no apologies for being the last man standing, but I will take this fight until I die. I will not stop.
Michael Anderson started the Aboriginal Tent Embassy here with 3 friends and a beach umbrella. But a grassroots movement has ensured its survival. And for First Nations people, it remains as relevant now as it did back then.
It took 4 men, but it's been 50 years of women keeping this movement. Just because there's only one alive doesn't mean that this embassy is finished.
It's about really establishing genuine sovereignty right here and acknowledging that we were here prior to colonisation, prior to those first fleets.
As the next generation draws on the strength and resilience of those that walked before them, they will continue the embassy's legacy, with plans to develop it into an educational institution. Kirsty Wellhour, ABC News, Ngunnawal Country.
People out there, take notice. If you saw this march coming up Elizabeth Street, you'd know that this is the biggest march in this city that I can remember since the moratorium days, perhaps even bigger. It's an indication of the feeling of the Australian people. The last time in the 60s when they had crowds this big, it forced the government to pull the troops out of Vietnam. Let's hope we can force Bob Hawke to do something about Aboriginal people this time round. All around Australia in a hope. It's so magnificent to see black and white Australia together in harmony. It's what we've always said could happen. We want our ceremonies. We want our language. We want our stories told to our children. We want to sing. We want to dance. And why do we do it? We and the land to talk to us. We are here today to call on the Australian government to give us justice, to give us the opportunity to attain our economic independence so that we can be free and dignified as people in our own future in this country. And then all of us in this country can work towards creating a truly egalitarian and racially harmonious country for the future. What we're saying here today, and what's very clear, and what will be very clear to Bob Hawke and to people all over the world when they see their television screens tonight and tomorrow, is that we have survived.
I'm an Aboriginal of the Dunghutti tribe of eastern New South Wales. As a fair-skinned child, I used to look in the mirror, hoping that one day my freckles would join up and I would be a proper Aborigine. Over the years, I discovered how white authorities in Australia tried to make us go the other way. towards whiteness. How they attempted to systematically wipe out the Aboriginal race forever.
Where's my family? Where's my family? I was taken away. So where's my family?
Well, removals began from the very beginning, that is by individuals. Right back in the 1790s in New South Wales and the 1810s in Tasmania, within 10 or 20 years of settlement, there were Aboriginal children who in one way or another had been taken from their families and were living with Europeans. It didn't become really a government process until the 20th century, when of course it was much more serious on a much larger scale. Governments had assumed that Aborigines were dying out, that evolution had dictated that they would eventually disappear. The number of what they call full-blooded Aborigines was declining. It appeared to be proving their scientific theories.
It was true, Aboriginals were dying in great numbers, but not because evolution had determined it. It was from gunshots, poisoned waterholes and diseases brought by the settlers.
The newspapers, the parliamentary Hansards, the diaries, which set out the Australian record plainly and clearly in black and white, show beyond doubt that most whites on the frontier were well aware that Aboriginal people were being murdered in very large numbers.